They say that after 15 years of marriage, you should know the sound of your partner's soul. I thought I knew David's. I knew his coffee order, the way he sighed when he was stressed, and the specific silence that meant he was deep in thought. I thought we were the solid ones, the couple our friends look to when their own relationships hit the rocks. I am the primary breadwinner, the one who navigated the corporate ladder to ensure our 2 children never had to worry about a bill or a meal. I was proud of our life. But a few months ago, the man I've loved since my 20s sat me down and told me our entire life was a cage. He told me he was a boiled kettle with no release valve, and that if he didn't start loving other people, he was going to explode. He called it coming out as polyamorous. I called it blindside. Tonight, I'm sitting in my car at the edge of our neighborhood, watching the rain blur the streetlights into streaks of purple and blue, and I realize I'm not just a wife anymore. I'm a ghost in a house I pay for, being told to get a grip, because I'm hurting from the lies he's telling me right to my face. This isn't just a story about a changing marriage. It's a story about what happens when freedom is built on the back of someone else's labor, and how quickly the person you trust most can turn your own sanity against you. My name is Claire. I'm 43, and for 15 years, I've been the engine of our family. I work in high-level finance, a job that is as demanding as it is rewarding. It's my income that paid for the suburban home, the private lessons for our kids, and the vacations that fill our photo albums. David, 46, has always been a more creative soul. He's charming. He's a great father, and he's been the anchor that allowed me to soar in my career. Or so I thought. We've had our ups and downs, sure. We've survived the sleep-deprived years of toddlers and the financial stress of early career moves. But I always felt we were a team. I was loyal to a fault. I never looked elsewhere because everything I wanted was right there across the dinner table. Then came the kettle conversation. David sat me down in our kitchen, the one I had just paid to have remodeled, and told me that monogamy had always been a struggle for him. He described himself as having this infinite capacity to love, a capacity that was being stifled by the constraints of our marriage. He said he needed to explore other relationships to be his true self. I was terrified, but more than that, I was desperate to keep my family together. I didn't want to be the small-minded wife who stood in the way of his happiness. He promised it wouldn't be one-sided. He said I should explore, too. He talked about radical honesty and infinite communication. I didn't know then that those were just words used to mask a much darker reality. I told him I'd try. I told him I'd read the books, learn the terms, and try to open my heart. I thought I was being a modern, supportive partner. I didn't realize I was handing him the matches to burn our life down. The learning phase lasted exactly 48 hours. Before I had even finished the first chapter of the books he recommended, David announced he had already found someone. It wasn't some stranger from an app. It was a neighbor, a divorced woman 11 years younger than him, who he saw every morning at the school bus stop while dropping off our kids. The speed of it made my head spin. I was still trying to process the concept, and he was already lining up a date. I felt blindsided all over again. When I tried to set basic boundaries, like asking for more time before he started dating or suggesting we work with therapists first, he shut me down. He got frustrated and said that boundaries were just another way for me to control him. He needed to be free to explore. But the freedom only went one way. A week later, I decided to test the waters myself. I reached out to an old acquaintance for a simple coffee date. When I told David, he didn't offer the radical support he'd promised. Instead, he went into a near meltdown. He said I wasn't communicating properly, that my timing was harmful to his mental state. He became so visibly upset that I ended up canceling the date and spent the night comforting him. I stopped pursuing anything for myself because his well-being felt more important than my own exploration. I thought I was being the bigger person. In reality, I was becoming a doormat. Meanwhile, the situation with the neighbor, let's call her Sarah, was getting weirder. She started ignoring me at the bus stop. She looked right through me as if I didn't exist. David kept insisting nothing was happening, but his behavior told a different story. He'd take 40 minutes to come home from a 5-minute walk to the bus. He'd linger until her car left the street. When he finally admitted they were talking, he defended her constantly. He told me she was struggling with the fact that he was married. I told him that was a red flag. If she had an issue with his marriage, it meant she didn't respect the structure of our life. It felt like my very existence was an obstacle to their progress. David didn't see it that way. He saw me as the reactive one. He saw her as a soulmate who understood his need for a release valve. The tension began to bleed into every corner of my life. Because I was so emotionally drained, my performance at work started to slip for the first time in 15 years. I'm the primary breadwinner, but I couldn't focus on spreadsheets when I was wondering if my husband was texting the woman down the street. The bills started piling up on the counter. The house, which I usually kept pristine, began to clutter. I couldn't find the energy to cook or clean. I was supporting the entire household financially, but I was crumbling physically. And David, he was lighter. He was energized. He was spending hours on his phone, smiling at screens while I sat 3 feet away, drowning in silence. I finally asked him to stop. I told him the relationship with the neighbor was hurting me too much, that it was too close to home. After a long, circular argument, he agreed. He said they would delete each other's numbers. He said he chose us. But the weirdness at the bus stop didn't stop. I'd see them standing just a little too close. I'd see him check his phone the second he walked through the door. One night, while he was in the shower, the trust I'd fought so hard to maintain finally snapped. I checked his phone. Her name wasn't in his contacts, but her number was. He had her notifications silenced. The message thread was a graveyard of deleted conversations, but the fragments that remained were enough to shatter me. They were still talking every day. He was telling her about our arguments, painting me as an unstable obstacle to their happiness. He was telling her he loved her. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He didn't even look guilty. He was angry at me for looking at his phone. He told me he hid the contact because he didn't know how I'd react and was worried I'd do something reckless and hurt her. He told me to get a grip. He said my toxic reactions were the reason people were afraid to be their true selves around me. That was the moment the kettle metaphor finally made sense. I wasn't the release valve. I was the water being boiled. David's freedom was being funded by my 60-hour work weeks. He was able to be polyamorous and exploratory because he didn't have to worry about the mortgage, the health insurance, or the kids' college funds. I was the one providing the safety net that allowed him to jump into the arms of a younger woman. The twist wasn't that he was cheating. It was that he had convinced me that his cheating was a sexual identity, that I was oppressing. He had used the language of therapy and self-growth to gaslight me into believing that my pain was a personal failure. He told me I was unevolved because I wanted the loyalty we had promised each other 15 years ago. Now, our finances are spiraling. I'm the one who makes the money, but I'm so paralyzed by depression that I can barely function at my job. My physical health is failing. I've lost weight, I don't sleep, and my hair is thinning from the stress. I am the one doing the cooking, the cleaning, and the parenting, while he spends his afternoons exploring with the neighbor. And the most twisted part? I still feel like it's my fault. I catch myself thinking, if only I were more open, if only I weren't so reactive, if only I could just be okay with him loving her, everything would be fine. That is what 15 years of love and 3 months of gaslighting does to a person. It makes you apologize for bleeding when someone stabs you. I realized something this morning as I watched the sun come up over the suburb I paid for. A release valve only works if the container stays strong. But David isn't interested in the container. He's interested in the steam. I've spent months trying to stop the spiral, trying to regain control of a marriage that he already checked out the moment he decided his needs were more important than our vows. I realize that I cannot fix a marriage where I am the only one playing by the rules, especially when the rules are being changed every time I start a win. I am done being a shell of a person. I am done paying for the lifestyle of a man who tells me to get a grip, while he uses my money to court another woman. I'm starting to realize that the reckless thing he's so afraid of isn't me hurting his girlfriend. It's me realizing my own worth and cutting off the supply. The first step to stopping the spiral isn't being more open. It's closing the door. I'm taking control of our finances today. I'm separating the accounts. I'm talking to a lawyer. And most importantly, I'm giving myself permission to be reactive. I'm allowed to be hurt. I'm allowed to be angry. And I am allowed to walk away from a release valve that was designed to let my life leak out until there was nothing left. When a partner uses the language of personal growth to justify breaking your heart, it's not evolution, it's manipulation. If you were the primary breadwinner and your partner told you they needed freedom while you provided their security, would you stay be supportive? Or would you realize you're just funding your own replacement? Let me know in the comments. I need to hear that I'm not the one who needs to get a grip. I woke up confused, energized, and honestly a little shaken, in a good way. After almost 20 years of marriage, something happened between my wife and me that felt completely new, not reckless, not impulsive, but intentional. And it made me realize how easily couples can drift apart without even noticing. I'm Mark, 41, and my wife Jenna is 44. We've been together nearly 2 decades. Built a life, built routines, built comfort. Like many long-term couples, intimacy didn't disappear, but became predictable, scheduled, safe. I was usually the one initiating, and while our relationship was stable, something deeper felt missing. Not just physical closeness, but emotional presence. The kind where you sit together on the couch without phones, where touch isn't rushed, where you feel chosen. About a year ago, we both made a decision that wasn't easy or cheap. We started hormone replacement therapy after months of conversations, doctor visits, and financial planning. It wasn't just about health. It was an investment in our future together. For months, nothing dramatic happened. My energy increased. My motivation came back. But Jenna didn't seem all that different. I quietly wondered if this was just as good as it gets in your 40s. Then one night, after a normal evening, everything shifted. Jenna came to bed with a confidence I hadn't seen in years. She was focused, present, assertive in a way that felt intentional, not accidental. It wasn't about technique. It was about attention. We laughed. We talked. We slowed down. We experimented emotionally, not physically. Eye contact, honest words, vulnerability. It felt like dating again, but with the depth of 2 decades behind it. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not just the intimacy, but what it represented. Effort, choice, prioritization. When I joked about it, she laughed, not embarrassed, not defensive, comfortable. That's when she said something that stuck with me. If I don't work the next day, I want us to connect. Not have to, want to. Here's the part that surprised me most. For years, I thought I wanted more physical intimacy. But what I really wanted was reassurance, that I still mattered. I wanted to feel like I was worth the time, the energy, the planning, the same way we plan finances, the same way we justify spending money on health, vacations, or home repairs. That night forced me to confront something uncomfortable. I had been measuring love by frequency instead of presence. Jenna later admitted that the therapy helped. But what really changed was her mindset. She stopped seeing intimacy as another responsibility and started seeing it as an investment. And yes, therapy costs money. Doctors cost money. Time costs money. But neglect costs more. Something else happened that week. She initiated again. Then again. 3 days in a row. Something that hadn't happened in almost 20 years. But the real win wasn't the streak. It was the communication. We talked about boundaries, about rest, about choosing each other intentionally instead of assuming the other would always be there. Marriage doesn't fall apart loudly. It fades quietly through missed moments, unspoken needs, and postponed effort. That night didn't fix everything, but it reminded us why we chose each other in the first place. Sometimes, turning a corner isn't about passion. It's about priority. If you're in a long-term relationship and wondering where the spark went, maybe the question isn't what's missing, but what stopped being invested in. Some days, I don't wish for a divorce. I wish my husband would fall in love with someone else, so I wouldn't have to be the one who breaks everything apart. I'm 33. My husband is 38. We've been together 14 years, married for 8. We have a 4-year-old son, a couple of pets, and a life that looks stable from the outside. But inside, I'm exhausted. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that settles into your bones when you've been carrying everything, emotionally, mentally, physically, for too long. We don't have assets to fight over. No house, no savings. We rent. We live paycheck to paycheck. I have my car, my job, and my son. And honestly, my son is everything. That's why I feel trapped. I've started wishing my husband would meet someone else. Someone new. Someone he could be happy with. Not because I hate him, but because if he left, if he found someone, I believe I could survive it. We could co-parent. I wouldn't fight for money or things. I wouldn't drag it out. I just wouldn't want to lose my child. But if I leave, it would be war. I'm afraid he'd fight me for custody, fight me for control, paint me as a villain, the woman who gave up, the selfish wife who stopped trying. And that fear keeps me frozen. I've been burning out quietly for years, loving a man who doesn't really see me, providing emotionally for someone who doesn't acknowledge how heavy things have been for me. Whenever I try to talk about what I'm carrying, he walks away, literally. So I stop talking. I've learned to read his moods, adjust myself, stay calm, stay small. He's not cruel. He's not physically abusive. He's just emotionally absent and sometimes angry in ways that make the air feel unsafe. He's a good dad, and I'm grateful for that. But that gratitude sits right next to resentment, because being a decent father doesn't cancel out being a neglectful partner. There's a moment I can't forget. During COVID, while I was pregnant and working 2 jobs, my husband let his friend move in with us. For a year, no rent, no help with bills, no real boundaries. That friend damaged our rented home, especially the basement, causing thousands of dollars in repairs. Money we didn't have. Stress we couldn't afford. Our landlord was furious. I was exhausted, pregnant, and terrified. That should have been the moment I left. But I didn't. I was 8 months pregnant, vulnerable, and scared of being alone. And I stayed. Since then, I've been expected to absorb his world, his hobbies, his interests, his priorities. Mine don't matter to him. He doesn't understand them. Sometimes he openly dislikes them. So I slowly disappeared. Then recently, he started talking about having another child, and something in me broke. Not because I don't want another child, but because I can't do this again, not like this, not with him. I already feel guilty that my son is growing up in a home where his mother feels hollow. He deserves better, a present mother, a happy one. And every day, I feel like I'm failing him. Here's the truth I've been afraid to say out loud. I still love my husband, but my soul is tired. Love without safety becomes survival. Love without effort becomes obligation. He wants her to love him the way I used to, before the neglect, before the disappointment, before I begged for change that never came. He doesn't want to take responsibility for the damage. He just wants things to go back to normal. But I'm not the same person anymore. And maybe that doesn't make me the villain. Maybe it makes me human. Sometimes staying costs more than leaving. And sometimes wanting peace doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally listened to yourself. I don't know what I'll do yet, but I know this much. A marriage shouldn't require you to disappear to keep it alive. If you're watching this and quietly wishing someone else would make the decision for you, you're not heartless. You're exhausted, and that feeling deserves to be taken seriously.